school of thoughts. It's a debate. It's a debate. It's a conversation. Please join in, especially our parents. We do have some professionals joining us today. We definitely have people who can chime in to it, to this conversation today. Before I introduce our main speaker for today, I want to tell a bit of a story. So on Thursday, I was having dinner with my family at a restaurant, not a high-end restaurant at all. It was just Wingstop, and I met a lady who, through conversation, found out I was an educator, and decided to ask me, "What do you think?" She had a young son with her and a daughter who already is in secondary school, and she said, "What do you think? Do you think he's better off at co-ed school or same-sex school?" And I said, "Oh, that's a really important question. As if you know, can you join this conversation?" So I hope she's watching me today. And I did give my opinion. Of course, as you know, when we do put up these questions up on social media, there's a lot of people who have their own opinion. So I want to read out some of that to you. So somebody said, "My son is 17 and now already only ready for co-ed because I think that younger boys, it's hard for them to cope in a class with girls. And this is why girls are seen to top up the classroom. Boys learn differently to girls." And then she mentioned the school, which I'm not going to mention. This school was a fantastic school, as it was single sex from year one, and it was so good for my son. The books they read was football focused and etc. Things that boys interested. And then she said, "I'm sure my daughter will fit into anywhere because girls can learn in any atmosphere." Okay, so that's one opinion. Another person said, so do you start to think about this question? Just going to go up to it. I can find it. Oh, let's see. The joys of technology. Okay, just in case I can't find it, I might just chime it in later. No, I can. I think I can. Maybe not. So I'm trying to scramble through my messages, and I think I might have lost that one. But I will put it in later. Okay, about her opinion. I can't quite remember what her opinion was. But as you can see, it's a debate. It's a question. Okay, so I'm really, 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 really excited for us to get on this morning. Okay, I want to introduce our main speaker for today. Again, the joys of technology. I'm going to go on to it. If we can present the profile, please, now. Thank you. So we have today with us Dr. Lloyd Gareth, head of school of Malvern St. James Girls School. Very interesting topic because Malvern St. James Girls has just announced that they will be becoming co-ed in September 2025. So you can imagine, Dr. Gareth has a lot to explain to us. Dr. Lloyd is the head of Malvern St. James, which was formed from the merger of Malvern Girls College and St. James School. His appointment marks a historic milestone as the first male head in the school's distinguished history. Dr. Lloyd brings a wealth of experience to Malvern St. James, having held headship in England, Wales, and China. Prior to joining MSJ, he served as head of Stoke Girls in Suffolk, where he demonstrated exceptional leadership in education. His extensive academic background spans multiple disciplines, having studied at the University of Exeter, Cambridge, London, Reading, Sheffield, and Trinity Laban, covering areas such as music, modern foreign languages, school management, and philosophy. Next slide, please. Dr. Gareth is committed to a new era of growth, building on MSJ's impressive heritage as one of the UK's leading girls' school and its reputation for academic breadth and rigor, enrichment and pastoral care. His vision and leadership promise to uphold and enhance the school's legacy as a beacon of excellence in girls' education. Please welcome to the fore, Dr. Lloyd Gareth. Have I said it the other way around?
That's
No.
perfect, Bernadette.
Dr. Lloyd Gareth, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Bernadette. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Forgive me, I'm in a tracksuit because immediately after this, I'm going out to coach sixth form tennis, which is one of my joys on a Saturday. I'll just be putting contact lenses in to take the glasses off. But it really is lovely to be able to speak to you about something hopefully where I have a lot of experience to be able to share with you. And it is something that I truly feel very passionate about, both the pros and the cons. Very briefly, I attended a co-educational school. It wasn't a happy experience. It was a very, very tough state comprehensive. That has no bearing on whether it's girls, boys, or co-education. All my career has been in teaching in the independent sector, and all with boarding. And I'm very passionate about how boarding can shape a child's values and prepare them for life after school, to engage in a really rewarding career and contribute positively to life. I ask all pupils to do three things to keep me happy: work hard because life's competitive, play hard, and it's through their sport, their music, their drama, etc., that they learn the really important life skills of leadership, teamwork, kindness, humor, motivation, etc. And most importantly, to look after each other. And by that, I mean bring all of their academic qualifications and competencies, all of their attributes that they've gained through their leadership and teamwork opportunities in the extracurricular, and commit to having a positive impact on the lives of others now and in the future, for when they go to university, when they go into their own careers, when they start their own families. And I think a good education is not just about preparing them to be strong academics, but it's about being good people. This world is desperately in need of people with strong ethical, moral values. And of course, those are not the sole domain of either girls or boys. My teaching career has been in both all girls, all boys, and co-education. And interestingly, when I look back at my 10 years as director of music and housemaster at an all-girls school, I was a very intrinsic part of the recruitment team there, attracting girls to the school. When I was one of the deputy heads at Whitgift School in London, an all-boys school, one of my key jobs was to recruit boys. And then in my five headships, this is my fifth headship, obviously, I think that the role of recruitment falls very heavily, or the onus of recruitment falls very heavily on the shoulders of the head teacher. And so in an all-boys school, I would talk about the benefits of boys not being distracted by girls. In an all-girls school, I would generally talk about the focus on academia without the distraction of potentially disruptive boys. In a co-educational school, what I have shared with parents is that life is co-educational, and it's therefore incumbent upon us as educators, and that's not just teachers, it's most importantly parents working with the teachers. It's incumbent upon us, it's our joint responsibility to help boys and girls to learn and play together respectfully, consistently respectfully at all times, and achieve their very best within a healthy community to prepare for life. So there are pros and cons to all. It's interesting that about a month ago, I was invited to be a panelist at the British Boarding Schools workshop. Some of you might have attended that. And I was speaking on the Thursday evening to about 500 boarding agents from around the world. I had been given the delightful topic about how the Labour government's VAT tax has impacted upon education, and how the British independent sector can mitigate against that tax. So I focused on the value-added experience and qualities that independent education in the UK can bring to bear on your children's learning. So it wasn't necessarily the most exciting of titles, but I tried to make it as engaging as possible. And while I was due to speak to only about 25 agents over the next 2 days, Julia, my fantastic head of admissions, and I ended up speaking to about 63 boarding agents, all of whom, with one exception, asked me, would we ever consider going co-educational? Because we've recently had an excellent inspection that praised the quality of teaching and learning at Malvern St. James. It was particularly complimentary about our pastoral care, how we prepare children for life after school, the co-curricular provision, all the activities that we offer, our boarding accommodation and life as a boarding student. And of course, that's so important for you as Nigerian families if you are considering a British school. One of my previous headships was principal of a founding school over in China for what eventually 1,200 pupils. I share that with you because I truly know what it's like to live 12,000 kilometers away from my friends and my family. And I regard myself as ultimately the big daddy to all of our boarding students. I have a really good, positive relationship with them. In fact, my tennis session now is with boarding pupils. And then later today, I'm walking some of the younger pupils with my dogs up to the top of the hills at Malvern. So I think that the head of a boarding school is much more than just a figurehead at the top of the school, the lead teacher, etc. They have to act truly in loco parentis, in the place of a parent, for the child who is living perhaps a very significant distance away. So at the British Boarding School workshop, prior to my speaking, an eminent lead authority in independent education, particularly in the area of operations and financial management, talked to all the agents and the participating head teachers and heads of admission. He talked about every school needing a USP, a unique selling point. And I've thought long and hard about this ever since, and I'm really glad that I responded at the time in the way that I did. So since I announced a week yesterday ago that Malvern St. James, which has been an all-girls school for 132 years, although one of the contributing founding schools did actually have 60 boys back in 1899. So for 132 years, the school has essentially been all girls. So you can imagine it was a pretty seismic U-turn to announce that we are going co-education. And we're doing so because we want to share the excellence of our values, the excellence of our teaching and learning, our values encompassing what I think make for a really good person prepared to be an excellent citizen in society: kindness, respect, honesty, the ability to forgive as well as to be forgiven, the ability to lead as well as the happiness and joy of being a team player. There's a beautiful quotation of Saint David, the patron saint of Wales, my own country, do the little things well. And it reminds us, I think, really to be humble and especially to be appreciative of everybody around us. I am no more important than somebody who works in the catering department, or somebody who works in house cleaning, or somebody who maintains the gardens of the school. We are one body, to quote St. Paul. And as such, those qualities, those values, which are really clearly lived here at MSJ more than any school I've ever experienced, those values and that excellence of education, we wish to share with an additional 50% of the potential intake, i.e. inviting in boys. We've recently joined a group of schools, Galaxy Global, and that in itself is enabling us to look at how within the group we can offer opportunities to girls and boys that they otherwise might not have had, not just nationally, regionally and nationally, but internationally. And all the schools within the group are now co-educational, or from September. So looking at co-education and thinking back to this British boarding school workshop when we were told, a USP, when I announced to all the parents that we were going to go from all girls to co-education, some parents absolutely understandably said, but what about your USP? It's an all-girls school. Why are you turning your back on the one obvious USP? So if I refer back to when I spoke 4 weeks ago before I made the announcement, and this was after somebody had said, understanding your USP is so important. I don't think that either single sex or girls, single sex boys, or co-education are a USP that stands as something that is special and unique. If I'm really honest, and I share this with you as a parent of 3 children, but also now a principal of a school, what really matters is, does the head teacher or principal articulate an educational philosophy that you as parents feel comfortable with, so much so that you would wish to entrust your son or daughter to that school? The head teacher's influence over his or her teaching staff, the operation staff, over the parents, and most importantly, if they are a visible head teacher rather than one who perhaps sits in the office and does lots of external meetings, etc., although those are our requirements. But a very visible head teacher should be able to live the values that they say the school represents by walking around the school, by leading assemblies, by ensuring that there is a tangible demonstration of kindness, respect, love. We shouldn't be ashamed to say the word love. I love every single pupil in my school. It's rather sad that no parliamentarian in the UK have I heard say that they love all of their constituents. And ashamedly, I can say I love my staff and all my pupils. So I think that our USP, if it comes to that, it's not our profile that is governed by gender. It's our absolute commitment to upholding the best values that I think are shared by all good human beings. People of all faiths and none can celebrate and should celebrate and live by love, kindness, respect, perseverance, commitment, diligence, thoughtfulness, all of those values that I'm sure you as parents appreciate and want to see in your children. So in an all-girls school, a focus can be that there is a lack of distraction from boys in lessons. Equally, I have seen excellence in co-education and all-boys schools. It comes down to the style of teaching, the leadership, the ability of the leadership team to hold staff to account. Very importantly, the discernment of the leadership in admitting the right pupils into your school. So what's been interesting talking to the girls over the past week here is they really want to be part of the journey of structuring MSJ for the next 132 years. So, we can tick off the obvious. They've loved contributing their thoughts on school uniform for boys, where the toilets, where the bathrooms, where the changing rooms, where the boarding accommodation will be. But going more deeply, we start talking about areas of the curriculum which can be taught more effectively either in a co-educational setting or, for example, if we're discussing adolescence through PSHE in separate classes, boys and girls. And that's very common in a co-educational school. And I think that's very respectful to parents' wishes. Going a little bit further, the discussions have focused on our values. So in addition to the standard mathematics assessment, the standard English assessment that any child will do when they're applying for a school, we're going to have an MSJ values assessment. So such questions as, how do you as a boy consistently show respect to girls? Conversely, how do you as a girl consistently show respect to boys? Another question, how would your friends best describe you in 5 words? That's a very insightful little exercise in itself. What 3 areas would your friends say you need to work on to be an even better version of yourself? So you need to really understand the values that you as a school aspire to, and consider in the admission of future pupils, both girls and boys, the kind of pupil that you want. Not just somebody who's going to manage well with the academic program, but somebody who embraces and lives the values. So if I'm now asked, what is the USP of MSJ? It's not that we're all girls. I would say the same for a boys' school. It's not that it's an all-boys school. it may be one of its key features, but really excellent education should come down to the quality of teaching and learning. That's indifferent to gender. The quality of living one's values at the school. It's the school ethos. So you may say, yeah, but that's just marketing, and it's hypocritical to have pushed for sisterhood in my last 18 months as head here, and now be talking about brotherhood. That was another question that the girls asked. Dr. Lloyd, where does sisterhood stand in this? Well, by golly, sisterhood will be just as strong, if not stronger, going forward, just as we would promote brotherhood. But more importantly, it's brotherhood and sisterhood working positively together, sharing and celebrating the values, respecting differences, celebrating those differences. We shouldn't shy away from acknowledging those differences. And if a co-educational school can get it absolutely right in terms of the social interaction between girls and boys, the promotion of high quality learning in the classroom, ensuring that gender stereotyping of subjects does not exist. So in single-sex schools, you may hear that girls will excel more comfortably in the STEM subjects without boys dominating. In all boys' schools, you may hear that boys are more comfortable to try out modern languages and performing arts, etc., without feeling self-conscious in front of girls. I just share with you that the very best lesson I ever observed, I'm an inspector of schools, it was of a year 9 class. So these are girls and boys aged 13 and 14. And it was a PE lesson. And they were choreographing the dance movements from West Side Story. And they were discussing cultural differences. They were discussing gender stereotyping. It was an extraordinary lesson of physicality and dance and reflection on who we are in society, who we want to be, how to ensure that we avoid exclusion. There were so many good morality stories within it. So I hope those are some interesting thoughts that I've shared with you as we prepare for going co-education. I've probably talked enough, and hopefully there's some questions out there. Thank you, Bernadette.
Thank you, Dr. Lloyd. Thank you, Dr. Lloyd. That was very explanatory. I did find my second comment on this debate of ours, and she was all the way mixed schools because young children do get confused about, I think she was talking about confused about their gender, and it's best for them to, and their mental health is at stake, and it's best for them to coexist as they grow up and understand themselves. I mean, there's obviously more context to that, but thank you for sharing that with us. Definitely, when it comes to education, what's important is the quality of education our children are getting, and not so much whether they are in an environment where it's just their own gender they're mixing with or not. So thank you for that. I do want to introduce our very own Dr. Alla, the founder of Brains and Butter. We are 9 years old this season, so it's a really, really important season for us here at Brains and Butter. But I am going to bring to the fore now Dr. Alla, just before we get the questions and answer.
Wow. Thank you so much, Bernadette. Thank you, Dr. Lloyd, for that amazing speech and conversation about how things have changed in MSJ and yet your ethos remains. Honestly, if we had just put an advert out there and said, oh, come and meet Marvin St. James, I'm not sure what the response would have been. But once we put the spin on it about single-sex schools or co-ed schools, the response was really, really interesting. And we've got questions and answers on the platform, questions being raised. And please, our amazing parents, we actually want to hear your voice. A number of parents already shared some of their opinions and their thoughts about this very interesting topic. The bit I just want to add in before Bernadette takes the Q&A and we hear from our parents is the historical dimension to how children were taught in the 17th, 18th century. definitely, historically speaking, there was that distinction between boys and girls, and some schools even run a diamond model where they teach the boys separately from the girls. And I was just wondering, I wonder what the thinking was at the time, but it isn't too far-fetched about how should I say patriarchal societies were, or how the roles of a woman were defined differently at the time, and it was just felt the boys should be taught differently from the girls, and a host of other reasons that reflected the thinking at that time. But there's certain things that have been stripped out of these historical reasons, but have remained for some schools that have chosen to remain as single-sex schools, whilst others have embraced the need to go co-ed. So I just thought it would be good to bring in that historical dimension as to why boys were even taught separately from girls in the first place. And when we strip right down to it, what are those things that what are the biological differences or the differences that we exist? I always ask parents, I have all boys, so I always ask parents that have both boys and girls, are there any differences, or is it just a personality thing? But when it comes right down to it, for me, it's about the school. It's the school, the school, the school. I went to an all-girls school because my parents chose that school because it was, and by the grace of God, still one of the most foremost all-girls schools in Nigeria. So they chose the school for me, and I'm glad I went to an all-girls school. But obviously, it really is different strokes for different folks, and we really want to hear the thoughts of our parents. I'm going to hand back over to you, Bernadette, to take the Q&A. And please, parents, please do put your hands up. We want to have a debate. We want to have a banter. This is a safe space. We want to have those conversations, and at the same time hear from Dr. Lloyd about Marvin St. James as well. So over to you, Bernadette. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Allah. Always well spoken. I also went to an all-girls school for the first part of my senior year, and then co-ed for year 10 and 11. And it was interesting. Do I have an opinion about that? I think I did well in all-girls school, and it was beneficial for my growth as a young lady, but also flourished, as you can imagine, for my GCSE years in a co-ed education. And it was just about the quality of education and the ethos of the school that probably made such a difference. So, yeah, let's move on. If we have any parents out there who want to ask any questions, I'm delighted.
Some questions in the Q&A.
Yes, I'm just going to go into the box now. Yes. Again, just making sure I knew this was going to happen to me. Right. So Q&A box.
So I'll read the first question.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. So how does attending a single-sex school or a co-ed school affect the student's social skills and emotional intelligence?
Would you like me to answer, Lauren? Yes. It's lovely to see you. I would honestly say to you as parents, really do your very best to visit any school that you're considering. At the very least, ask a trusted agent or family friend who knows what matters to you, what matters to your head and to your heart, to visit the school. The moment that one walks through a school, and I say this as a head with 19 years of experience, as an inspector of 18 years, you start to feel what the ethos is. People talk about a gut feeling. Well, a gut feeling is being informed by a myriad pieces of factual information. It was very interesting that I was listening to the Radio 4 program today, last week, and they interviewed a journalist, and he and his wife have a son and a daughter who attend a secondary school in London. And they said that when they visit the school, they're really heartened to see photographs and pictures and references to very positive women as role models for the girls. And they have this down a corridor. Very sadly, there isn't a single photograph of a positive male role model. And it was very interesting hearing this program. For far too many decades, if not centuries, women have been suppressed. Let's be very honest. There is still inequality in our society, which is why I will fight for absolute sisterhood, whether I'm in a single girls or a co-educational school. And if we're talking about balance in a co-educational school, this is a really interesting topic for me, because if you're talking about balance, you may be assuming I'm talking about 50% boys, 50% girls. I promise you that won't be balance, not in practice, because boys tend to be physically bigger, physically louder. So you may have a 55-45 or a 60-40. If the school is sport obsessed, and that is their right, I love sport, but I'm not sport obsessed. I'm kindness obsessed. So test the head teacher in the questions, test the staff as you walk around, ask questions of the pupils to see what their thoughts are. Yes, sport is great. It can be transformational. So too can music or drama or art. Art very often will attract a child who, for whatever reason, walks to a slightly different rhythm, if I put it like that. And they need to be able to express themselves. It comes down to the quality of relationship between the teachers and the pupils. That it should not depend on gender. I come back to it should, you need to look at the quality of teaching and learning. That should be irrespective of gender. I say should because we also have to be honest and acknowledge that that's not always the case. For some teachers, it is much easier to manage a group of girls without boys or a group of boys without girls. There are all sorts of techniques. I was very fortunate that I trained as a teacher at Cambridge, where I had a truly inspirational counsellor for educational psychology. And he taught me all sorts of lovely skills that would not be evident if I were just walking around a class. And it's quite useful because I can use it in staff meetings as well. And you can very discreetly address a problem without drawing attention to it. There are all sorts of ways. Speak to any experienced teacher, and they might be able to share this with you. It shouldn't come down to all girls or all boys. It should come down to the quality of relationship, the knowledge of the teacher, and their ability to impart, educational concepts, etc., to bring out the very best of the pupils. I see that one of the questions is about myths and misconceptions. So not so much a myth, but a reality in an all-boys school is there can be a bit too much rough and tumble, and there can be a lack of respect for girls and women. And that's based on my personal experience. So I'm not saying that that's always the case. And I would like to think that the vast majority of those single-sex boys' schools that are remaining, because let's face it, single-sex schools are really challenged these days. Society, both in the UK, but especially globally, is looking more and more to a healthier balance in co-educational schools. And, in the independent sector, we can't forget that we're in a business, albeit a business in developing minds and hearts. But, at the end of the day, it is still a business. So I have to ensure that I've got sufficient numbers on school roll to ensure that there is investment in the facilities, that there is, sustainable growth. So I would like to think that, most boys' schools are addressing this misogynism. And it is true. I've got a daughter and two sons. They're in their 20s. My daughter has had many wonderful, positive role models to look up to in women, because for too long, women have had to fight for recognition. Sadly, in this world, there are too many negative male influences and role models, and that needs to be addressed. The positive role models are few and far between, sadly. We've got to find them, just as we've got to maintain those positive female role models. So one sort of aspect that does need to be addressed in an all-boys school is there consistent respect shown to girls and women? Are matters addressed? Do we hold people to account? In an all-girls school, one of the challenges, particularly when girls are sort of aged 12 to 15, is the cattiness, the unkindness, the friendship difficulties. Often girls' schools are quite small, so there is a greater intensity within the relationships. And in girls, much more so than in boys, certainly in my experience, there's a need to have a best friend. And having a best friend isn't, and Anlo is nodding, it's not a healthy way to live. A much healthier way is to have a whole load of good friends with whom you can move in and out depending on circumstances, and not to be so emotionally dependent. That's a very rare phenomenon within boys' schools. It's a very common phenomenon within girls' schools. And it's interesting that my deputy head pastoral, who's outstanding, she and I have been working on and off for the past 2 months, resolving or doing our very best to resolve some very complex, often very silly but difficult relationship problems amongst girls, sometimes exacerbated by their mothers, not to be quoted. And so I'm just sharing you very openly and honestly where things can go wrong, where they can go right. I love seeing girls playing hopscotch in the quad, regardless of their age, or going out to play sport really competitively and not caring about if their makeup runs a little or if they look a bit sweaty when they come off the playing pitch because they don't want to put boys off. They can be true to themselves. Where boys were great fun in an all-boys setting, it is probably the sense of fun and outrageous camaraderie that can grow. But again, where you get it right in a co-educational setting, it is a joy. So at my last school, as I hope to be able to emulate, I'm confident that I can do even better here because the set of values are more clearly expressed and lived here. It was a joy to see, for example, sixth form boys playing tiddlywinks with 11, 12-year-old girls out on the lawn in front of my office. If we can promote those family values without a self-consciousness, either, a concern about, oh, hey, is my masculinity being compromised? Or, from a girl's point of view, am I looking less attractive or more attractive than the next girl to impress the boy? If we can remove those unhealthy gender-related issues and promote positivity in relationships, recognizing and celebrating the differences, as I said earlier, then a co-educational school can address any myths or misconceptions that may be inherent within the single sex, but it does work, and it takes everybody following that set of values underpinned by kindness and respect at all times. So I hope that answers those two questions.
Yes, and honestly, you've raised a number of key issues. I want to draw out three from a number of key issues you've raised. First of all, we all know that the independent sector, honestly, these are probably some of the hardest times that the independent sector is having to go through. From the VAT, small business rates, minimum wage. There's so many things happening within the sector, and we do have to think about growth. Some schools are having to face closures. We've seen some emails about some schools closing down. So there is that happening, and you really have to, you want to preserve what's special about the school. So I'm really grateful that you mentioned that point. And then the second thing I wanted to draw out is the very emotional side of girls that can really be an issue within an all-girls setting, and how that is managed. I mean, we have our reunion anniversaries, and we still have ladies well into their 40s who don't show up for the reunions because 30 years upwards back, they had some issues with other girls and they just have gone their separate ways. And you have some others who've just really moved on, who had quite an amazing time, who found a best friend and they've stayed friends. And so it really has been a mixed bag. Now, the third point I want to talk about is, I think, the hormones and the sexuality side of things, because I'll be very honest with you, I think for many African parents, that's a concern. Also, it's the teenage years. girls are getting aware of themselves, their bodies, and so are the boys as well. And all of that rage of hormones happening within a co-ed setting is what has probably bothered some African parents in the past, especially about a co-ed school. Like, oh, I don't want my daughter distracted with this boy, or I don't want my son distracted and messing around with girls. So there definitely are those concerns about how those hormonal changes are managed either in a single sex school or in a co-ed school. And I like how the question put myths or misconceptions. I think that's such a fantastic way to put it. And the conversation is getting really interesting. So Bernadette, I'm going to hand it back over to you. There's a question in the chat box, and then there's another one back in the Q&A. So over to you.
Certainly. What an interesting concept, an area for discussion, hormones. So I'm from a very large family, and my three sisters all attended single sex. My brothers and I attended co-ed. So their experience is something that I've not really forgotten, and I've seen it time and time again, often, magnified by some. If you deny, let's take girls. If they're in an all-girls setting, if you suppress opportunities for them to regularly mix with boys, boys become a mystery. They become a source of fascination. They could become a source of excessive fascination or obsession. And the same can happen with boys in an all boys school. That girls are this mystery beyond understanding. And so when they do eventually meet, either during their secondary school timing or afterwards, those suppressed hormones, the suppressed thoughts, discussions, etc. It's a mystery that can unfold in a less than positive way. And any self-respecting parent should ultimately want their child's happiness and their safety. And of course, we've got to be very honest here. We would be concerned about sexual abuse, and that can work both ways. Similarly, the intensity of being in an all-boys school or an all-girls school can, especially in the 21st century when there's so much unpleasantness on social media, it can promote questioning one's gender and orientation too soon. There's no criticism whatsoever here of either heterosexuality, homosexuality, or anything that lies in between. But if you are living in a microcosm of what society will eventually be, i.e. a co-educational setting, I've come to see that we can address those concerns if we are honest and if we manage those concerns as we would wish to as parents. I'll share with you the question and answer session that my deputy head and I had with year 6 girls. So I'm seeing each year group for a good hour and a half, and they write their questions beforehand. They don't put their names down, and I haven't shied away from a single question. And one of the questions, well, it was asked by about several girls in year 6. So these are girls aged 10 going on 11. How will you teach puberty and how will you teach menstruation if there are boys there? Okay, I hope that does not cause any offense to anybody here. These are the natural questions that a child will want to ask, whether they're a girl or a boy. And the form tutor, who's a very experienced teacher, she chatted with the girls while I was listening. I read the question and hands immediately went up, so much so that the form teacher said, "Oh, we discussed this the other day in PSHCE." And the girls said that they thought it would be much healthier to discuss aspects of adolescence and puberty that are relevant to girls and to boys. They thought it would be good to do that collectively in a co-educational setting, which was heartening to hear on the one hand, but I could also see that this is a sensitive area. And I think it would be judicious of any decent head teacher, rather than to make the assumption that this is acceptable, is to ask the parents, because that's a matter that for many parents, they want to discuss with children. So if they're handing over the responsibility from that kind of the educational biological point of view to the school, then the parent should have an input as to whether that is taught girls and boys separately or co-educationally. It may be that you do it separate and then later bring them back together to raise the sort of the awareness of what it's like for the opposite side, because, you know, after all, most of those girls and boys will end up marrying, and I hope that they will be very happy in their lives. So, you know, the issue of gender is an interesting one. I think in a single-sex school, you can run the danger of not acknowledging the healthiness of a good, normal relationship, and instilling possibly a fear. I know that some of my girls at MSJ are now frightened at the thought of boys joining. You know, I've got two sons. They love their sport. They're typical young men. They would have loved to have learned in a focused academic environment without demonstrations of peacock alpha male posturing. My daughter experienced an all-girls school just for a few years, and she hated the cattiness. And she's a very sporty girl, and she didn't like it that the other girls were less sport inclined, and she didn't care that she came off the sports field a bit sweaty. She wanted to prove the boys that she was better than them in most sports, and she was. So if the school demonstrates from the very top all the way across the staff, and with the collective support of parents and governors, that we are committed to a really healthy co-education, that's great. It doesn't always happen. Just as in single-sex and single-sex girls and boys, you may have really good examples of how they regularly integrate with the opposite gender for socials. But that's a bit manufactured. So coming to a school that's co-educational, it's in the classroom. There may be some lessons taught separately. So if you get it right, it works brilliantly. It comes back to making sure that you are comfortable as a parent with the educational philosophy that the head teacher espouses, and that philosophy is not only supported but practiced by all the staff under their leadership.
Thank you, Dr. Lloyd. It also comes down to the particular child. Is this beneficial for them?
Yeah.
Like as you said, your description of your daughter, is it beneficial for her to go to a single-sex school or co-ed, and the ethos of the school and all of that? There's so many aspects. And I like the fact that you said parents should really, really be employing or asking people who are experts in the field of choosing schools for a specific child when they are looking at schools. So of course, that's where Brains and Butter comes in. Parents, we are here to help. We are here to help. There are experts. I mean, we have our lead consultant on the line. I mean, if I were you, I'd type away, parents, type away, and make sure you get her to sort of advise and help you. We've got another question, or is it a question or comment in the chat box? I will read and we'll find out. Okay. Do we have the same learning outcomes for girls versus boys? If schools can take care of sex-specific learnings, life is co-ed in every other ramifications. A single-sex only school will have additional tasks of teaching the other sides in theory. Shall I read that again?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Do we have the same learning outcomes for girls versus boys? If schools can take care of sex-specific learnings, if schools can take care of sex-specific learnings, which if you just addressed, Dr. Lloyd, life is co-ed in every other ramifications. Okay, a single-sex only school will have additional task of teaching the other sides in theory. I don't know if I agree with that, but yeah.
Absolutely. Outcomes. A good school is a good school. An excellent school is an excellent school. A mediocre school is a mediocre school. I've seen examples of all three in single girls, single-sex boys, and co-ed. In single-sex schools, girls are more likely to choose a STEM subject at A level, statistically, than they are in a co-educational school. Equally, boys are more likely to take up a language or one of the performing expressive arts, music, drama, art, in a single-sex school than they are in a co-educational school. Design, technology, mathematics, biology, chemistry, physics, computing science would, in many co-ed schools, be the sort of overriding area that would have boys support. Languages, less so humanities, but expressive arts would attract girls. So therein lies society's influence to stereotype. So it is a good school's responsibility to address stereotyping from the very beginning. So in a positive co-educational school, I would hope to see sort of examples on the classroom walls of female scientists who went on to achieve great things, to invite female guest speakers to talk about medicine, engineering, veterinary science, design, technology, AI. In a good co-educational school, I would hope to see that art competitions are being judged by male artists, that there may be male musicians coming in to give performances. So you may have, even on your teaching staff, of course, who can be pivotal in influence, you must make sure that there is a balance in gender. Every head teacher's every head teacher has responsibility to appoint the best applicant for any teaching post. We know that that's the case. It shouldn't be governed by gender. Nevertheless, and I'm being very honest here, and I would hope that most head teachers would be sufficiently honest to agree with me publicly, occasionally there may be a factor where, for example, you've got a very strong character of one gender who is in a gender stereotyped subject, and that might need to be addressed. It may be that they need a second in department who is of the opposite gender. So you've got to ensure that the values the school says it lives by are underpinned by good decisions, good appointments, a good curriculum structure that is inclusive. If I start to go in, this is such an interesting topic, isn't it? If I'm thinking of certain GCSE and A-level subjects, and certain examination boards, and the opportunities within each syllabus to select areas of study, then it is very much in the power of the teacher, who of course should be accountable to the senior leadership team, to choose elements of the syllabus that counteract any gender imbalance concepts. So if I take English, you might be wondering what on earth I'm talking about. English. Let's talk about English literature in an all-girls school. It shouldn't be focusing just on female novelists, female poets, etc. Make sure you have that balance. If in science you're referring to historical scientists and you're in a boys' school, cite female examples to counteract any gender bias. It's a really interesting topic, and it can go very deeply per subject. If I'm looking at my own, my subjects are music and languages and philosophy, but if I'm looking specifically at music, it's very difficult to demonstrate female examples across most of the centuries of classical music. It's only in the 20th century, really, do female composers start to emerge as a force to be reckoned with, certainly within Western culture. And you know, yeah, you look at 20th century pop music and 21st century pop music, it is actually dominated by women, especially the good ones. So I think gosh, it's such an interesting question, isn't it? That it challenges every teacher in every subject to think about, how do I avoid gender stereotyping? If you can do it, as I have seen at my previous school, and as I hope to bring here, it can be fantastic.
And I second that, Dr. Lloyd. Honestly, it is the joys of the teacher to sort of see how learning can be as diverse and equal to all the students in front of that teacher. But as you said, your specialism, and just using my specialism as an example, sociology, there isn't that much theorist or female theorist I will be able to put in front of, even if I was teaching a single sex classroom or a mixed gender. It's just that there are more male sociologists in my field than I can produce female, you know. But it's not in producing no, it's not in showing that women can or men can be sociologists. It's how, I think, how we educate our students, how we give the importance of, you can do this no matter what you are, no matter whether you're a girl or a boy, whether you're female or male, you can become who you want to be. And it should be what every school should be giving our students.
Absolutely,
again,
Bernadette.
Parents, it's your responsibility to look at the schools and see how it fits with your child, specifically with your child. Okay, the next question I have on here, I think we've answered it. Do students in single-sex schools typically perform better academically than those in co-ed schools? I think we've answered that. As good school is a good school. A student should go to the best school fit for them. Another question, are we indirectly influencing career choices and preferences of boys, girls via co-ed versus single-sex education system? What is the educational goals of our society? And is this always in sync with the children's real aspirations?
What an interesting pair of questions. Well, interesting. Now that you've posed the question, I think that unconsciously, without any explicit, conscious willfulness on the part of a single-sex school, I think the single-sex environment can influence career choices, but not necessarily always for the best. Careers, again, should not be governed by whether you're male or female. It's interesting, isn't it, that until about 30, 40 years ago, certainly in the West, the majority of doctors were male. Now in the UK, it's nearly 70% of applicants to medicine are female. So it's gone the opposite way as society has placed greater emphasis on bedside skills, you know, empathy, kindness, which unfortunately were not the sort of the prerogative of your typical alpha male. You know, so again, it's challenging gender stereotyping in a co-educational school where both sexes are recognized as truly equal, and where boys understand and accept in their head and heart that society is still prejudiced in many countries against women, then career discussions can be incredibly rewarding and mitigate against any sense of influencing over future career choices. I interview every single student in year 11 in September after they've done what is called the Moresby psychometric test. And it assesses what you are good at, what you are not good at, what you like and what you dislike. And it's a fantastic tool to help a student choose the right A-levels ahead of choosing the right degree at the right university before embarking upon what hopefully will be the best career possible. So the psychometric test, almost you work backwards. understand what the child's most likely career path is, and then you look at how they get there, all the way back to the choice of A levels. Those discussions are incredibly rewarding, absolutely free of gender bias. There's nothing that one can do to prepare for these 4 30-minute assessments. And it is amazing doing this with girls and boys, because they're doing it solo without the influence of society or mobile phones or laptops or their friends talking to them. They're doing it under, an exam condition, although you don't prepare for it. So their answer and the response, and it has a 96% accuracy in terms of future career prediction. It is solely specific to them as an individual. And that kind of ties in with the second part of your question, relating to, education goals of our society. Are those always in sync with that child's real aspiration? I will say to parents, parents of boys, girls, whether in single sex or co-ed, don't impose your views or your hopes upon your child until your child has found their own voice, their own strengths, recognizes their weaknesses, so they can shore up against those. And there is nothing worse than seeing a child doing the A levels that their parent has told them they must do in order to access a particular career path. Again, without wishing to stereotype, but there are certain cultures that will expect their child to do the sciences in order to become a doctor or a pharmacist, and great careers. But is that the choice of the child? Let the child's strengths emerge in time, when they are ready. And so at that point, it's the school's responsibility to ensure that the child accesses every single opportunity to explore their strengths, to know their weaknesses, and then to discern possible career paths. So as I say, I personally interview every single child in year 11, and it makes the most enormous difference to spend 1 hour on a one-to-one basis with every child, to help them discern their future choices at A level, university, future career, etc. And putting aside that sort of academic side, it's just lovely on a personal basis that as a head, who has to be doing so many other things, I get to know each child by name and their passion, their interests, some of their worries, some of their concerns, and I follow every interview up with notes to their respective teachers in order to ensure that, the child can exceed their expected grades by 2 if they need some particular support. So coming back to that second part. Coming back to that second part, as parents, yes, be the guide to your child. Don't impose views. Listen to what your teachers are giving you as feedback. There's a beautiful quotation from a small book. There's a very small book. It's a novelette, really. Some of you may know it. It's called The Prophet by Kahil Gibran. And it just has a little saying and a sort of a metaphoric picture to help you retain an idea. You'll read it in the space of 2 hours. And on one particular page, there is a person holding a bow and arrow, sort of like this. And the teacher or the parent is the archer, and the bow, and the arrow is your child or your student. And it's your responsibility to hopefully point that child in the right direction. But once you've equipped them with the confidence and the competence to face society's challenges, you let go.
Wow.
And they fly their own path, hopefully based on all that you've inculcated them. And so as a head teacher, as a teacher, as a person, as a parent, I hold that image very close to my heart, because it's so easy to forget that we are the archer and we have to let go of that bow. So I just share that with you to see if it helps.
Fantastic, Dr. Lloyd. That was really profound. It's interesting to know. I'm just thinking about it. When children are really small, we are big on exploration and them exploring so they can grow and their brains get bigger and they make choices. But as they get older, we sort of, unconsciously parents and teachers alike take that away from them and not allowing them to explore as much. So it's interesting to hear that in your discuss this morning. I mean, education is equal to exploration. Exploration is equal to education is equal to exploration. Exploration equal to education. That is what education is. Let the children explore, and ultimately their strength will emerge, and we naturally can see what they should be choosing as careers or become in the future. What an interesting conversation. Yes.
Bernadette, you've made me remember one of my favorite things that I like to say as a teacher or a parent. So I just share it with you, that the word education comes from a Latin word, educere. And educere is it's actually an agricultural word, and it means it depicts the farmer digging into the ground where he suspects there's a spring. So you dig into the ground to allow the water to flow forth. So it's about allowing the spring to come forth rather than hammer home what you were imposing. And again, as a parent or a teacher, remember what the real word educere means. It's to draw forth, not to run home. And so it's a bit like the Cahill Cabran. We are the archer. Let's do all we can to send that bow in the right direction. But when we let go, it's their path.
Yeah. Thank you. What a beautiful way to end. Thank you, Dr. Lloyd.
I have one quick addition. So so sorry, because honestly, that was such a perfect end. I really like the question on careers. I really, really do, because it goes back to those subject choices. It goes back to personality, right? And how are these influenced by gender, as it were. And speaking about gender and careers and subject choices, I remembered when I was doing my PhD, and when we look at gender in development, one of the very first things we would say is the biological sex is different from gender. Because the question that was being asked was, are there biological differences that do influence how boys learn differently from girls, or how girls learn differently? It really, when you strip it all out, because gender really is a social and cultural construct on how these different sexes should behave, or what is expected of different biological sexes, as it were. So that really was the question being asked, that are there biological differences in boys, in girls, that influence their learning, and are there certain environments that help to nurture that? Because life may be co-ed, but some careers are not co-ed. Some political spaces are not co-ed. So so that's why I really like the question on careers. I think that was, because that's the end goal, right? That's the long-term space that we're looking at here. It's been such a fantastic conversation, and it's like I could not have asked for a better head of school than Dr. Lloyd to take this topic. So back to you, Bernadette. I just wanted to bring in the sex and gender and career dimensions to all of this.
Thank you. I feel like we can have this discussion on and on and on. And I feel like I want to add more things, but I'm going to stop myself because time's fast spent, and Dr. Lloyd needs to go and do see that group of students. Yeah. So I just want to thank everyone. I want to thank especially Dr. Lloyd, Dr. Allah for joining us today, and our parents. Thank you for availing yourself to this discussion, and obviously me in MSJ as well, and the head of MSJ, and finding out more. Of course, as Brains and Butter, we are here to help you for further questions. And yeah, that's us over and out. Thank you. Join us again for more exclusive meetings.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. God bless.
Bye-bye. Bye.